Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Mental Mosaic with Kiki Garcia. The whole entire reason why I started my podcast and my YouTube page was because I lost both my parents in 1 year in 2020. And it was just such a strange place to be. No one knows how to talk to you. You don't know how to express what you're feeling. And I just wanted to make a safe space where we could come talk about our emotions and maybe help each other. Because the one thing when my dad especially was passing away, I just felt so alone. And it's silly because death is something we all have to deal with in one way or another, earlier or sooner. So that's why I'm super excited to have our guest with us today, Karen Johnson. She wrote this great book. It's called Living, Grieving. And I think it's just so important to tell your story and to talk about how you're dealing with it. So first of all, Karen, let us know a little bit about your personal journey. What brought you to the decision to ultimately write this book?
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing that happened was the death of my 27-year-old son from a heroin overdose. And that really pretty much shifted my entire life for me, because he and I were very, very close. And also, gosh, he came to me after he passed. I was actually traveling overseas. I got the call from a detective, the call you never want to get, and was told that he had passed. And so I was trying desperately to get back home, which took me a really long time because of the evening and the flights and the schedules and all that. But when I was sitting in the airport, he actually appeared in front of me, just like he was alive, with his big old grin, everything. And then he kind of faded away. And so I frantically called my ex-husband and said, I think he's in the freezer. I think he's trying to get out. You have to have the Emmy go look. And they very kindly did and said, no, I'm sorry, he's passed, So, but that was really, sometimes death is a doorway into finding something deeper within ourselves. And so that was a doorway for me to say, oh my gosh, there really is life after death. I could see, sense, feel, hear him around me. And so, yeah, sometimes death is that doorway.
Wow. You brought up a word, shift. And I think that it's how I feel as well. My dad and I, we spent many days in the hospital, and I was by his side the whole entire time. And it wasn't all bad. He had cancer, glioblastoma, and it was a time of being together, just the two of us. We were laughing, we were trying to figure things out, we were kind of lost, both of us. But afterwards, it is a shift because now I feel like in my life, and let me know if you feel this way too, everything that happens is before my parents passed and after my parents passed. And that's how even songs on the radio, I work on the radio, I do a morning show, and I hear something. Dua Lipa is a song that always stands out for me. And I think to myself, oh, I love that song right before my life completely changed. And it just brings me back.
For sure. I call it before death day and after death day.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's that moment when our lives are profoundly changed. And sometimes when things happen in the ordinary course of things, when somebody's really elderly, something like that, you kind of go, oh, okay, I get it. This is making sense. But when things are out of order, when you have an unexpected death or the death of a child, things are, you're in a world of hurt. Or for someone, you watch them passing slowly, they're suffering, and parents who have children with addictions. And every day, is it going to be today? Is it going to be today? Are they going to live today? So, these kind of deaths leave a big hole in our heart and in our field and in our mind, and trying to go on after that can be a struggle. I know it was for me. I wasn't sure I wanted to go on, really. And I think a lot of people get to that state, and then trying to figure out, I don't even understand death, grief, why, what are we here for? And how can it possibly create a new life? What can I do with this life now?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to make sense of anything.
So, as far as work is concerned, how do you think workplaces can maybe support us a little bit better? Because I notice, everyone's afraid to bring it up. And it's not that I don't want to, I want you to acknowledge it because it's something major. I mean, death is just as big as getting married, having babies, it's the same, and yet no one talks about it. They're so afraid. How can we do a better job at that at our workplace?
Yeah, so I think some workplaces, I mean, the particular workplace I was in, they said, well, you can have 2 hours off for your son's funeral. And I'm like, what? Right. And then with a lot of going back and forth, it was like, okay, you could have like 3 days or 5 days of administrative leave. Okay. And then there was a lot of pressure because a lot of it, some of it was self-imposed and some of it was outwardly imposed because I had been on vacation and my son passed and then I'm asking for another week and all this pressure where there's hearings and there's schedules. And because I was administrative law judge in Washington, D.C., you can imagine lots of pressure. Mm-hmm. These things are scheduled. When are you going to be back? Blah, 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 blah. So I dragged myself in the week after and really I was in no condition at all. And really, I think people really need a lot of support at this time. Some companies and businesses have those kind of people that you can turn to in a crisis. They have them on staff and some don't. But I think it ought to be something that people, managers, bosses of all kinds look at and say, okay, this employee, we can put a lot of pressure on them to come back and they may come back. But what I can tell you is from my experience is that people come back, and you can deal with that grief now, or you can deal with it later, but it'll catch up with you. Mm-hmm. I know a guy who for 16 years never told his coworkers, never told anybody that his son had passed. And 16 years later, he completely fell apart. Other people have autoimmune disease disorders, cancers, things like that. So unresolved grief getting stuck in us is not healthy in any way. And it's not good for the bottom line for companies. It's not good for performance. It's not good for anything. In fact, it caused me I had to leave. I knew I could no longer work in that environment for many reasons, mostly because after death day, everything changed. And I couldn't, and then I was interested in spiritual things, mostly to begin to talk to my son much more. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of became a wider and wider spiritual exploration. And I eventually became a shaman. And now I have a worldwide practice and I help people dealing with grief and with all kinds of issues. And so it's changed my life completely. So here I am in a beautiful lake in the middle of the countryside and not in the second worst traffic in the country in Washington. Mm-hmm. And left all that behind. So I had a major life change. And so my book is really for people who feel themselves to be stuck in grief, right? Mm-hmm. So there's lots of books and I read them all too. Okay, you need to do this. You need to go on a date or you need to go to the movies or you need to go to a picnic. You need to get out and this is how you step by step. But a lot of people are saying, I can't take those steps. I'm just not ready. And so I think there's a little work to be done before we take those steps in a spiritual way. And so my book talks with 16 different practices that we can look at things like, where are you stuck? Where are you stuck in your grief in a way that maybe you don't even know where you're stuck exactly? Mm-hmm. Are you stuck with judgments against people like your mother, your father, your sister, but people that didn't come through, the hospital, the doctor, yourself? Are you judging your loved one? Mm-hmm. I mean, I know I sure was kind of mad at my son. I'm like, was not supposed to be. He wasn't an addict. He went out to a party. They got drunk. They decided, oh, let's try heroin in their drunken state. And they gave him too much. And he was a big guy, 6'8". They gave him too much and he died almost instantly. So it can happen to anybody at any time. And, Yeah. So sometimes we got to find out, where are we stuck?
Yeah. How devastating. I didn't realize that's how it happened. I mean, it just makes you realize that every little decision you make in your life could have such extraordinary results, and you just never
Yes.
know. I mean, that's so frightening. Like, I mean, how do you unstuck yourself from that? I can't even imagine what you went through.
Right. Well, it's all that shame, blame, guilt. I should have done this. I should have said that. Maybe it was that I should have put him in a different school. Maybe it was this. Maybe it was that. Maybe I should have spoken up sooner. I shouldn't have gone on vacation. Right.
Mhm.
So that's a big one too. So we do this. And so the exercise are challenges to these beliefs that we're holding that we may not even know we're holding. And so that we can release them. And so in the shamanic path, it's the path of fire. So I use a fire ceremony with a candle and a piece of paper and a pad, and you can sit down in radical honesty and write your answers to these questions. But the real beauty of it is when we sit in a ceremonial way and we sit and really get in touch with this internal part of ourselves, the spirit within us.
Mhm.
And you can write anything down with radical honesty. And why is it radical honesty? Because you're going to burn it. Nobody's ever going to see it. So if you want to say, my sister was such a bee or something, or they didn't do,
Yeah.
you can write it down. Nobody's ever going to see it. Right.
Mhm.
And so we know about ceremony because when we go into a temple or a church and they have candles that you can light for somebody, we go right over, we light the candle, even if we're not part of that faith. So we know that, we have this relationship with the divine and divine places. So if we bring that relationship and that create that ceremony in our own home while we're doing these exercises, we're getting out of our physical, our reptilian brain every day, fight, flight, freeze, all those kind of things, and
Mhm.
moving up to our neocortex. And we, in the neocortex, in the ceremonial way, things move with the lightness of a feather instead of in the physical realm, we're struggling.
Mhm.
And so, that's where we want to look. We want to see, what can we do? What kind of things are holding us back? What stories, my stories that I was telling myself will be different than somebody else's. But that's that story that maybe you're clinging to, that guilt, that shame, blame, guilt, the thing that often somebody will need to move.
Everything you're saying has me, like, I have questions in mind, and then everything you're saying is bringing up like 10 more questions. So we're definitely going to have to do this again because, like, I mean, I have so many things to say. But, how do you how do you like create a space where you're honoring your loved one who's passed every day? Because for me, I get upset sometimes because I feel like people are forgetting. Like, I feel like nowadays the generations that are coming up, they don't revere the elders in their family as much as we did growing up, first of all. So there's that. But then there's this other element of forgetting the loved one and what they meant to all of us. How do you honor that and keep their spirit alive?
Right. So we live in such a soundbite world, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right. And even with grief, time to move on, time to get
Yeah.
over it, time to do this. And, come on now, let's not talk about that. You mean the elephant in the room?
Right. Right.
Right. So there's two aspects of that. Is that one aspect that satisfies us, and then what we're thinking about might satisfy the loved one on the other side, that we say, hey, they're looking at this and saying, you already forgot me, you didn't care very much, right? And nothing could be further than the truth in that. They absolutely know how everyone feels, and they don't need us to for the adulation, for us to have their room as a shrine, for us to do things that will make sure, impose on everybody at every opportunity for them to remember them, because they know already everything that goes on. And so if we're trying to please them, then one thing I should know is that what they really wish you knew is that our being stuck here kind of holds of their kite string. As we're stuck, they're a little bit stuck. They can't do all that they could do on the other side. And so we want to release their kite string and try to, allow them to move on and allow ourselves to move on. So really the issue is, how can we move on in a way that honors them?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was writing this book. This book honors Ben, and it also helps people. I help people and honor him at the same time. So everyone has that little thing that we want to get to. And so that's the journey that we're taking in my book. And it's a journey around the medicine wheel, but it could be any wheel, any journey. It's a hero's journey through grief, through transition. Our loved ones go through these stages: transition, resurrection, rebirth. And we too, as the bereaved, transition from having them in our lives before death day, after death day. Then we kind of wake up and go, okay, they're gone, right? After a while, get over the shock. And then there's that last phase of being reborn and creating a new life out of the ashes of the old that honors them. And that's where we want to get to. That's what makes us feel good. And that's what frees them and frees us. So
I am in love with you. You are just saying so many things. Like I'm like holding back the tears right now, because that's how I feel. Like I feel like my journey with my parents cannot be just for nothing. And like I said, that's why I started the podcast. I'm doing a TED Talk at the end of July about, just realizing our strength, because I think that's another part of it. I feel like we don't realize how strong we are and how resilient, even in the face of something that's could just devastate you forever.
yes.
We don't realize our strength, and we don't give ourselves credit. We never, if I say anything, positive about myself, you almost feel like people are rolling their eyes like, oh, here she comes again, talking about, what she did, blah, blah, blah. But it shouldn't be like that. We should be happy for each other.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand why we're not.
No, I think it's remarkable to have this podcast, and for someone like me to have the opportunity to reach your audience. Anybody that my all desire in writing the book was reaching the people that need to hear it, that somebody that can be helped and go, oh, I just shifted my perception a little bit. And that's what we work with, our mind. And so exactly what you were saying, one of the exercises in my book is indigenous alchemy. Wow, that's a lot of words. What does that mean? So I had to look it up. So indigenous means native or innate, and alchemy, desire, transformation. So what if we have within us, as humans, we have this innate desire for transformation, right? And so trying to be stuck and saying, I'll never move on, I'll never get over this, I'll never know, all the nevers, is really antithetical to the way we are as humans and our life goal here on earth. We're here to transform everything, alchemize everything, even our grieving hearts and death. That's what we're here to do. And so we can get away from the guilt, the shame, blame, guilt. Okay, I'm getting over this too soon. There's no winning in guilt, in grieving, as you know. If you grieve too long and hard, it's in the DSM and you get a pill, right? It's like severe grief. And so now that's a thing. And if you don't grieve long enough, wow, she didn't seem like she really cared. So here we are. What are we going to do? So what I say is, go on your own journey. And it is a journey with grief. And it's going to take you as long as it takes you. And if somehow you stumble across my book and you want to make that journey around the wheel with these 16 exercises, great. And that will help you to get to that spot of inner wisdom and inner knowledge with grief, because, the Creator must have put death and grief here for some reason other than just to make us miserable.
Right.
It must be here to teach us and to help us learn and grow. It certainly did that for me.
I truly believe everything bad that happens, you have to find the good. And my dad is really the one who taught me that, because a while back he had a head injury and then he had sort of a little stroke and he couldn't use his hands well and he had to go through all the rehab. But it was funny, like as much as he was going through, he was laughing because he couldn't put his keys in his pocket. And instead of getting mad, he was like, will you look at what I'm doing? I'm dropping them on the floor. What the heck? And he was laughing about it. And I remember, and I remember thinking, you know, all my life I grew up hearing, oh, my mom is so strong. My mom, my mom. But it was my dad. Like he was the rock. And I don't think you need to be the loudest person in the room to be the strongest person.
For sure.
At all.
For sure.
Yeah. So where are you located? Can we do things with you online or is it a face-to-face? Oh, okay.
For sure. Yeah. Anytime you can do anything. So people can reach me at karenjohnson.net. That's my website. And I offer a lot of different services for people who are grieving and bereaved. And I have a class coming up. I think it was going to start July 10th, but I think it's going to start August instead. But and I take people through my book. It's a 5-week class and we do 4 exercises a week and then talk about it. So people can work with other people that are grieving and go, I never thought of that. Oh yeah, that's I was judging that way too. I'm going to go back and release that too. So it's a way, you know, shamanic work is like breathing in fresh air and breathing out the heavy stale. So when we're doing these exercises, we're releasing the old ways, the old judgments to spirit, to the consciousness, whatever your philosophical or religious viewpoint is, it doesn't matter, but you're releasing it. And you're opening your heart for new ways, to new ways of thinking, being, doing. So that's what these exercises are. They're like breathing. And so, so that's what I do.
I had this awful thought the other day and, you know, I talked to my husband and I put it away right away. But, you know, in my head, I have like, because obviously I know how old my parents were when they passed. So I have like this countdown in my head. Okay, you have X amount of years left. You have to like do something with them and, you know, make them count and make your parents proud. But then I also feel like, oh, I lost my thought now.
I knew the countdown.
Yeah, the countdown. And I know what I was going to say. But then I started feeling like, wait a minute. What if after all this time and I get through and, you know, I pass away, what if I don't get to see my dad again? And it just like broke my heart all over again, because for me, I have to believe that after all of this is said and done, like I will see my dad again, because
absolutely,
I can't live like that without thinking that.
Well, I can tell you in my experience, and I help a lot of souls to transition. That's one of the things I do. And I can tell you that he's going to be waiting right there. And he's right behind you all the time. He's right all the time. So, you know, and I always tell people, they say, well, how can that be if they're fully transitioned and they're in heaven or wherever you think that is, nirvana? But it's not prison. They can come back and forth.
Right.
They come visit. It doesn't mean they're stuck. Right. And so they come back and forth and they will be there for you and they'll help you, guide you the way home and show you the ropes once you get there. And I know this is true because I've seen it over and over and over again.
Do you ever get worried that with helping other people through their grief, you're going to get stuck in the sadness of what happened with your son?
No, not anymore, because I know for sure one thing that this has taught me is that he is really, really happy on the other side. So, you know, every once in a while I have a sad day. It doesn't mean I'm never sad, like on the death day or his birthday. And the last time I'm like, Ben, it's, you know, your birthday, your death day. I'm so sad. Come and visit, you know, and he visits a lot, you know, and he came down and he said, Mom, you're kind of being a bummer with this. You know, I'm right here. And actually, I'm kind of busy. And we weren't particularly religious. He's like, I'm in the Jesus pod right now. Jesus is really cool. It's not any of this stuff you hear in the Bible is different, but he's really, really cool. And so you're fine. you're fine. You don't need me right now. As only a 27-year-old male can tell his mother, right?
Right.
So,
Oh my gosh.
so, I mean, how cool is that to know? And I can tell you that with every being that I meet on the other side, they are happy and they're doing their work. What makes them unhappy is to see us unhappy.
Mm-hmm. I
So
believe
don't
that.
worry, they will be there. He will be there, and all your ancestors, and some of the ones you never knew from the before.
Right.
So the great greats, and the guides and angels, and it's always a beautiful homecoming.
I love that. I cannot wait to talk to you again. You have to come back.
Oh, I would come back
chat with
anytime.
us.
I love talking to you too.
Okay, good. Once again, though, tell everyone where they can find you, where your website, social media, whatever.
Yeah, KarenJohnson.net is my website, and it's just KarenJohnson. And then on Facebook, it's Karen Johnson Healing. So I have Facebook and Instagram too.
I love it. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Seeing you again.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.